Decision 98 continues. From Washington, D.C., here again is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening once again. We want to tell you that tonight it's a better night than President Clinton might have reason to expect just a few weeks ago. It does appear tonight that the House Democrats will about break even with the Republicans. They may lose a seat or two, but there was a time when they were fearful that they would lose somewhere in the double digits. On average, on an election year of this kind, the party of the president in power will lose from the House of Representatives an average of 27 seats. That has not been the case here tonight, and in fact, the Democrats have made some very substantial gains on the Senate side, knocking off Alphonse D'Amato, the Republican, after 3 terms. Also in North Carolina, Locke Faircloth, one of the most conservative Republicans, beaten tonight as well. They lost the Republican governor's chair in South Carolina. On the other hand, there were some big Republican gains tonight as well. Jeb Bush is the new governor in the state of Florida, for example. And in Texas, his brother, George W. Bush, has now put himself in a position to make a strong run for the presidency in the year 2000. Watching all of this very carefully is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, on average, the party of the president does lose about 27 seats. The fact of the matter is, it looks tonight like you could be in about a wash with the House Democrats. Do you think that it's possible that the Republicans overplayed the presidential scandal here in this off-year election?
Well, I think it's very likely that you all in the media dramatically overplayed it, but the fact is, Tom, that since Bill Clinton became president, we've gained 51 seats in the House, 12 in the Senate, 14 governorships, and 500 state legislative seats. I think when the night's done, we'll have gained in every single one of those areas some additional seats. No first-term president ever lost as many seats that I can remember as Bill Clinton lost in 1994. We're going to consolidate that tonight, and this is the first time in 70 years that Republicans will have held the House for 3 consecutive terms. So I just have to say, on my part, it's the earliest I've ever been able to announce victory here at home. And as the next Speaker of the House, I feel pretty good.
Well, no one doubts that you're still a formidable force, but when you meet with the Republicans on November 16th in the caucus, do you think that there will be any retrospective done among the Republicans about their tactics? And what about your own future as the Speaker of the House? Do you think that that will come in under discussion?
I think the big message of this election is that every governor who cut taxes did very, very well. I think we should go back to Washington and in January focus first on saving Social Security and then on cutting taxes and have a tax cut for economic growth. But the fact is, every single Republican governor who is doing well tonight is a governor who cut taxes, who modernized government. That's our message. That's what makes us different from Democrats. And I think we have to go back and work on that message, which, as you know, Tom, the House Republicans did this year when they passed an $80 billion tax cut that unfortunately didn't get through the Senate.
Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, a number of those Republican candidates for governor told me that they were running away from the strong ideological message of the congressional Republicans. My final question, I guess, tonight is, do you think it will be necessary to put some kind of limits on the impeachment proceedings, which are also on your agenda?
Let me go back to, you all are fascinated and fixated on impeachment. I want to save Social Security, I want to cut taxes, and I want the Congress, Democrat and Republican, to do their constitutional duty in enforcing the law and not be moved by either polls or by talk shows.
All right, thank you very much. Speaker Newt Gingrich, congratulations on your own re-election tonight as well. Well, not much talk about impeachment there from the Speaker of the House of Representatives, talking about a lot of those issues that the governors who were Republicans and were successful out there in the states were talking about.
And what our voters told us tonight, they want Congress to focus on Social Security, education, health care. But the Speaker does have to deal with impeachment, Tom. His party is very, very divided. Some people want aggressive hearings. Some people want it to go away. He is the man now who has to make the decision. What do the House Republicans do about impeachment this year?
All right. Here's a big loss for the Republicans. They did have some substantial gains tonight as well, but this was a big loss in the state of New York. They poured a lot of money and resources into this. What, about $30 million, I think, spent on this race, about $15 million between a piece by these two candidates. Alphonse D'Amato, who is the often called Senator Pothole for his constituent services, 3 terms as the Republican, defeated by Charles Schumer, a well-known Brooklyn congressman who is a well-known liberal in New York, and they had a very aggressive race indeed. As you can see, Charles Schumer is the winner in New York tonight, and NBC's Matt Lauer is at the Schumer headquarters. Matt?
Thanks very much. Chuck Schumer hasn't entered the room yet. We expect him to do that very shortly. I don't know whether you should call this a war or a street fight, but this got real nasty real early. Of course, Al D'Amato, the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, he was the man who headed up the hearings, the Senate hearings into Whitewater. Some people, especially those at the White House, felt that he was particularly hard on Hillary Clinton. In response to that, maybe as payback for that, the president, the first lady, the vice president all campaigned vigorously for Chuck Schumer, and apparently that worked. Chuck Schumer has unseated Alphonse D'Amato after 3 terms in the Senate. A little information from the exit polling that might shed some light on the outcome. We've been hearing an awful lot in the last 10 months about honesty. On the subject of honesty, we asked people as they left the polls, do you think Alphonse D'Amato is honest? 30% said yes, he's honest. 62% said no. Those numbers couldn't have helped Alphonse D'Amato. Chuck Schumer has won this race. Tom?
Thank you very much, Matt Lauer. Between the two of them, they spent about $30 million in New York alone. This was a new record and shameful in the eyes of a lot of people. $1 billion spent on electoral politics in America in an off year, 1998, for congressional elections. We want to share with you now the results in some other key Senate races around the country. Locke Faircloth, one of the most conservative Republicans in that chamber, a great friend of Jesse Helms, defeated in his bid for a second term tonight by John Edwards, a political newcomer in South Carolina. Fritz Hollings, the old lion of South Carolina Democratic Party politics, going back for a 5th term. A very strong race down there as well. In Georgia, Republican Paul Coverdale, a good friend of Newt Gingrich's, he has been reelected in Georgia, a Republican from the state of Georgia. Some races that are still too close to call. Paul Fitzgerald giving a very strong challenge to incumbent Carol Moseley Brown. She was thought to be the most imperiled of the Democratic incumbents. In Kentucky, a crackerjack of a race for the seat held by Wendell Ford, the Democrat, Jim Bunning and Scott Baszler, 2 well-known athletes, Bunning a Hall of Fame baseball player and Baszler a basketball player in a dead heat. Russ Feingold getting a very strong challenge from Mark Newman out in Wisconsin. Feingold, a Democrat, limited his spending and contributions. As a matter of principle, he's been one of the leading advocates of campaign finance reform, and it may have cost him in the end. Let's go to NBC's Maria Shriver now in California, who's been keeping track of some fascinating governor's races around the country. And Maria, I think that it's fair to say that we may see some presidential candidates coming out of those state houses just 2 years from now.
That's for sure, and I'm sure that I'll give you and Tim a lot to talk about. But let's talk a minute. The Democrats now have something to smile about when we talk about governorships. They have won 3 hotly contested governorships this evening. There you see it up there, South Carolina, where Jim Hodges defeated incumbent Republican Governor David Beasley. A second conservative incumbent governor, Fob James, also goes down in Alabama, defeated by Lieutenant Governor Don Siegelman. And the Georgia governor's mansion stays in Democratic hands, where it's been since Reconstruction, with the victory of Roy Barnes over Guy Milner. But in 2 southern states, no surprises and good news for the Bushes, who took both Florida and Texas. That was expected. There you see Jeb Bush just a few minutes ago hugging his proud parents. You recognize them, George and Barbara Bush, back in the political arena. They are 2 proud parents this evening. Also, we want to take a look at, you see there, George Bush, who, as expected, won in Texas. In New York, as expected, once again, goes to incumbent Republican Governor George Pataki. Wisconsin stays with its Republican incumbent governor, self-described father of welfare reform, Tommy Thompson. And it's too close to call right now in Massachusetts. Republican incumbent Paul Cellucci is in a dead heat with Democratic Attorney General Scott Harshbarger. And in an unbelievable development in a 3-way race in Minnesota, take a look at this. Vice President Hubert Humphrey's son, Hubert Humphrey III, may tonight lose the race, and his dreams of becoming governor hurt by the surprisingly strong showing of Reform Party candidate Jesse the Body Ventura. And politics always is up for surprises. And looking out towards the west, where polls are still open, Democrats are crossing their fingers tonight for the biggest prize of the evening, California. Lieutenant Governor Gray Davis is hoping to become the first Democratic governor of this state in 16 years. And we want to emphasize once again that polls are open, so we can't call that. Back to you, Tom.
Thanks very much, Maria Shriver. I think that we have a late call on the race for governor in Iowa. A surprise here as well. That state house has been held by Terry Branstad, a Republican, for 16 years. It was widely believed that Jim Lightfoot, a congressman, would win as governor, but we are projecting tonight that Tom Vilsack will become the new governor of Iowa, a Democrat. A reminder, you can follow all of this on MSNBC.com tonight as well. That's our website and our sister station, MSNBC. NBC's Katie Couric is in New York. She's been poring over those election exit polls all day long, finding out what voters voted, how, and why. Katie?
Tom, that's right. We have more now on what voters were thinking today as they pulled the levers in voting booths around the country. 64% disapproved of the way the Republicans in Congress have handled the Lewinsky-Clinton matter, and 36% approved of the way it's been handled by the GOP. Only 40% of those we polled after they voted today think that the Congress should proceed with impeachment hearings. 60% think the matter of impeachment should be dropped. We asked voters just how much they think the United States Congress has accomplished in the last 2 years. 18% said more than usual, 37% said less than usual, and 45% said about the same as usual. Later in the evening, we'll be able to tell you more about just who voted today. Tom, back to you.
Thanks very much, Katie Couric. Well, Tim, we have another governor's race to call. In the state of Massachusetts, the Republicans have now gotten a bit of a hold on the state house there. Paul Cellucci, who succeeded William Weld, who was the Republican governor, he has held off a very strong challenge from Scott Harshbarger, who was the Democratic Attorney General in the state of Massachusetts.
Ironic that the Republicans win the governorships in Massachusetts and Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and lose them down south. Tom, the only thing we can point to tonight is who turned out. And there are indications that a strong turnout of African Americans gave the Democratic Party a real boost. We won't be able to quantify that for some time, but just based on who we're talking to and looking at, it could have been an extraordinary development in the Southern Democratic Party.
Well, the other thing that you can say about American politics after a night like this is that all the fault lines have been scrambled. There are no clear lines left in the Democratic or in the Republican Party as you look across the political landscape at the federal and the state house level. We'll have more on all of this tonight, continuing on Decision 98 on this NBC station.
Decision 98 continues. Once again from Washington, D.C., here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening once again, and the numbers have been scrambled in your nation's capital as a result of your votes tonight. The Republicans are still in control of Congress, but they didn't pick up the kinds of seats that they expected to. And as a result, we could be in for a kind of a stalemate for the next 2 years. We want to show you now what's been going on in the U.S. Senate at this hour. If this pattern holds, the Democrats will actually pick up 2 seats in the U.S. Senate. The conventional wisdom was that the Republicans would pick up probably 4 or 5. That could eventually happen before the night is out. But right now, it does appear that the Democrats could pick up 2 seats before the night is out. The margin was 55-45 going into tonight. 34 seats were at stake. Here are the races that are still too close to call. A third of the precincts have been counted in Illinois, and as you can see, we cannot make a projection in that race. Carol Moseley Brown is the Democratic incumbent. She was the most imperiled of all the Democratic incumbents, but she's made a strong comeback in the past couple of weeks or so against Paul Fitzgerald, her Republican challenger. In Kentucky, a fascinating race down there. Jim Bunning is a Hall of Fame baseball player, the Republican. Congressman Scotty Baszler was a captain of the Kentucky basketball team under Adolph Rupp, and he and Mr. Bunning have been locked in a very bitter race down there all campaign long. In Wisconsin, Russell Feingold is the Democratic incumbent. Strong challenge from Mark Newman. Feingold tried to limit his campaign spending. He's been one of the leading advocates of campaign finance reform. About a fifth of the precincts have been counted so far. Feingold a lead now of those votes that have been counted, but we cannot make any kind of a projection at this hour. Nonetheless, it's been an unexpectedly good night for the Democrats. It probably brings a smile to the face of this man. He's Senate Democratic leader Tom Daschle of South Dakota, who had his own re-election tonight. Widely expected to do very well out there. Mr. Daschle, what will be the first order of business when you come back to Washington?
Well, the first order of business is to continue to strengthen this economy, Tom, to do all that we can to help working families. We had the agenda last year, and I think that's really what made the difference. People understood what our agenda was all about, and we're going to go right back to work and do it again next year.
But the fact of the matter is the President of the United States has not been healed as a result of today. Don't you think that we'll probably have a political stalemate as both parties now try to jockey for position for the year 2000 with neither one of them with an overwhelming advantage?
Well, you can go back to presidential years in the past, as you well know, and find some very productive ones. You know, when the president was on the ballot last time, we were able to get a number of things done. We passed a new minimum wage. We passed the Kennedy-Kassebaum health bill. We did a number of things that I think merit a look again. I think if we did it then, we ought to be able to do it in the next 2 years.
There is that 100,000-pound gorilla, however, sitting in the dome just behind me, and it's called the impeachment proceedings. Will there be a real effort on the part of moderates in both parties to try to work some kind of a deal to avoid impeachment proceedings going all the way, Senator?
I think it's a little too early to tell. We obviously don't know what the House intends to do, and we do know that I think they'll, as a result of all of this, there'll probably even be greater pressure on them to expedite whatever decisions they'll make and make their decisions sometime in the not-too-distant future. Beyond that, Tom, I think it's very hard to come to any conclusions about how this is going to play out.
Senator Daschle, thank you very much, and congratulations on your victory tonight.
Thank you very much.
All right. Tim, what about the possibilities that just not much will get done in the next 2 years because the Republicans are going to kind of dig in, getting ready for the year 2000. They're going to be recalibrating what their political strategy is. The Democrats don't have enough to push them around, really. And the president is down there still in a wounded position.
He has to get this impeachment process behind him, Tom. And you can hear in Senator Daschle's voice and Congressman Gebhardt, and I think Speaker Gingrich, there is a willingness to try to get this thing resolved. Going into tonight, the Democrats were petrified. There would be 60 Republican senators, meaning the Democrats couldn't filibuster and only 7 short of an impeachment vote to, in fact, take the president out of the Oval Office. Now that threat has subsided dramatically. If the president can put the impeachment process behind him, take a censure perhaps, then he has one issue he can bring both parties together on, Social Security, and say that the country has told us to fix this. Let's come together. I think there's a unique opportunity in '99 to give that a try.
Politics is always about survival. The fact is, these Republicans on Capitol Hill who had such strong ideological beliefs and really went after the president, money marbles and chalk, they're going to get a big message tonight from the country, I would think.
Nothing concentrates the mind like the prospect of hanging. And the people have said, deal with health care, education, and Social Security. And there are viable Republican alternatives to the president's plan on all those issues if they will articulate them.
If you're watching for signs, you heard him from Newt Gingrich tonight, who's already talking about those Republican governors. And speaking of governors, NBC's Maria Shriver in California has been keeping track of those races around the country. Maria?
Trying to. Thanks, Tom. Well, just to recap for everybody, the 36 governors' races that we are watching tonight, 24 were held by Republicans, but there have been some big disappointments tonight for the GOP. They have lost 3 governorships, Alabama, Iowa, and South Carolina. But the good news for them, they kept Massachusetts and Ohio and picked up Florida, where Jeb Bush won on his second bid to be the governor of that state. His brother George W. Bush, of course, coasted to victory in Texas over Gary Morrow. There you see it. Other Republican wins in New York, Michigan, and Wisconsin, all in Republican hands tonight. And in Minnesota, still locked in an amazing tight 3-way battle. There you see Jesse Ventura, Hubert Humphrey III, and Norm Coleman. This is an incredible race. The Reform candidate Jesse Ventura, we remember that state gave Ross Perot about 24% in the last presidential election. In California, the polls are still open, but Lieutenant Governor Gray Davis hopes to win that governor's mansion here for the Democrats for the first time in 16 years. Now back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Maria Shriver. Someone else who's in California tonight watching all of this with extra attention is the former Vice President of the United States, Dan Quayle, who with his wife, Marilyn, I think he traveled to 35 states altogether. Mr. Vice President, a lot of people are going to be saying tonight and tomorrow the Republicans probably overplayed the scandal hand here. Do you agree with that assessment?
No, I do not agree with that assessment. I do believe that the Republicans should have been far more forceful and articulate in getting our agenda before the American people. We have a very progressive agenda. It's an agenda that requires tax cuts, especially for the middle class, education savings accounts so they can save for the tuition payments, tutoring, whatnot, banning partial birth abortion, missile defense system. These are our issues. And unfortunately, when you don't have your issues out front, and the only issue that seemed to be talked about by some was whether the government was going to shut down or not, that was a mistake. Get our agenda out there. We have a good one. Those that did get the agenda out were very successful.
Mr. Vice President, do you think that there ought to be some kind of middle way in the impeachment proceedings, some kind of an agreement, maybe over censure or a limit on the hearings at least?
They may be able to limit the hearings. No, I am absolutely opposed to censure, and I'll tell you why. There's nothing in the Constitution for it. It will be somewhat unprecedented. What I am for is to vote on impeachment. This is not a difficult case. Is perjury an impeachable offense? Just vote on it. And if there's the votes in the House for, if a majority votes in the House for impeachment, then it goes to the Senate and resolve this thing. This thing should not drag on for a long period of time. And if there are not the votes to remove Bill Clinton from office, so be it. He goes free. I am not for censure, even if the House does not have the majority, or if, more importantly, perhaps if the Senate does not have the 2/3 to remove him from office. I do not support censure under any circumstance.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. I know that we'll be seeing a lot more of you in the next couple of years. I've been saying, I think it's Peter Fitzgerald who's making such a strong challenge to Carol Moseley Brown in Illinois. Now let's go to NBC's Katie Couric, who's in New York, and she's been looking at those exit interviews with the voters as they came out of the polls today to find out what's on their minds. Katie?
That's right, Tom. You know, as voters left the voting booth today, we asked them to look ahead to the presidential race in the year 2000. 45% said that they would support Democratic Vice President Al Gore. 55% said they favor the Republican governor of Texas, George W. Bush. And we'll be back with more exit poll information, Tom, in just a few minutes.
All right, thank you very much, Katie Couric. Someone who has been kind of a poet, philosopher, minister, if you will, to the Republican Party during the course of this scandal is William Bennett, who's the keeper of the moral flame for the Republicans and for the country in many ways. Mr. Bennett, are you surprised that there's not more outrage expressed politically about the President of the United States in these election returns as we're seeing them so far?
No, God help us if I'm the moral flame. No, I'm not. In September, I wrote a book called The Death of Outrage, so I'm not surprised what we're seeing tonight. But let me not spin you. This is a good night. I'm a Republican, as you know. This is a good night for Democrats. Republicans need to realize a couple things. You can't beat something with nothing. You have to have an agenda. In this town, you're either on offense or on defense. If you're not on offense, you're on defense, and tonight they're on defense because they didn't make a case. I don't think those ads about Bill Clinton were particularly strong. I think they shouldn't have talked about about Clinton lying, not telling the truth. They should have talked about perjury and lying to the grand jury. Bill Clinton is one heck of a politician, one of the best we've ever seen. But his honor is in no better shape tonight than it was yesterday.
But from a political point of view, has he escaped the trap tonight of impeachment?
I don't think so. For people who lose their nerve or lose their conviction or principle because of the vote, well, too bad for them anyway. They could be in either party. You've got to do the right thing if you're in the Congress. You made a point earlier, which I think is very good, which is the country is scrambled now. It's not a good thing for the country to be liberal and Democrat in the North, conservative and Republican in the South. The fact that you have Republican governors in Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, for Pete's sakes, and Democrats taking those houses in the South complicates the map. But that's okay. It's a complicated country, and we should think of it in that way.
Thank you very much, Bill Bennett.
Thank you.
Who, for those of you who don't know, is the brother of Bob Bennett, who has represented the President of the United States in the Paula Jones case. We have a projected winner, Tim, in Nebraska. No big surprise here. Mike Johans, the Republican, will have the state house there. Another scrambled state. Bob Kerrey is the former governor and the senator from there. We'll probably see him in the year 2000. They found a way, kind of the middle way. We'll be hearing a lot more about that, I think, in American politics in the next couple of years especially. And,
Tom, we should note Republicans will still control about 60% of the governorships in the country, which is a very important number. California, we wait with bated breath, because if the Democrats take the governorship in California, they're in charge of redistricting. So all the congressmen in the year 2000, they'll draw up those districts that can help the Democrats in the House.
And lest you not forget, in the year 2000, California moves way up in the presidential primary calendar. We'll be back with more on Decision 98 right after this.
Decision 98 continues. From Washington, D.C., here again is Tom Brokaw.
Well, this election night did not quite work out as the Republicans had hoped. On August 17th of this year, they thought they had the president on the ropes. After all, he confessed that he'd had that affair. He lied to his family, his friends, and the country. There had been a recommendation of impeachment proceedings, and yet at this hour, if the patterns that we're seeing now hold, and they could change dramatically, but not all that radically, but if they hold, the Democrats will have gained one seat in the United States Senate. Let's take you now through the Senate races. We have them so far. In New York, Alphonse D'Amato goes down to defeat the Republican bulldog after 3 terms, loses to Chuck Schumer, Brooklyn congressman. In North Carolina, Locke Faircloth, close friend of Jesse Helms, one of the most conservative Republicans in the chamber, loses to a political novice, John Edwards, in that state. Fritz Hollings goes back, a Democrat in South Carolina, the junior senator in that state at the age of 77. The senior senator is Strom Thurmond. He's 97. Between them, they average 87 years of age. Paul Coverdale is a Republican senator from Georgia. He's going back, a substantial win in the state of Georgia with about 2/3 of the precincts counted so far. In Kentucky, look at this. It doesn't get any closer than this. 92% of the precincts have been counted so far. Jim Bunning and Scotty Baszler, 2 kind of world-class athletes in a very tight race. Bunning, a Hall of Fame baseball player. Scotty Baszler, who played for the University of Kentucky Wildcats, captain of the basketball team under Adolph Rupp, in a very, very tight race. As you can see, 9,000 votes separating them. Pretty much the same thing in Illinois. We can't make a projection yet. About 80,000 votes separating these two. Carol Moseley Brown is the Democratic incumbent. Peter Fitzgerald, who was the surprise winner in the Republican primary out there, continues to hold a lead tonight. But based on the voting patterns we're seeing, we can't make a projection. Wisconsin, same thing. 1/3 of the precincts have been counted so far. Of those votes counted, Russell Feingold, the Democratic incumbent, has a substantial lead, but we always have to look at where the votes are coming in from. So Mark Newman is the challenger there, and we don't know what's going to happen in that race. Mississippi, Trent Lott is the Senate Majority Leader, and we fully expect that Trent Lott will be able to win his election down there. Any problems down there tonight, Senator?
Well, we're still looking forward to some victories tonight. We believe that we will win Illinois, and that will be an upset of a Democrat incumbent. We feel very good about the Kentucky race. We think we're very competitive in Wisconsin and in Nevada. So we think we still have the prospects for not only holding our majority, but building on it. We'd like to have even more. But any time that you have the majority of one party in control of the Senate, the House, well over 60% of the governors and the majority of the state legislatures, you have an opportunity to advance an agenda. And we've got one we're going to be pushing, and it's tax relief for working Americans, controlling government spending. We do have a surplus for the first time since 1969. And we're going to continue to work toward more local control of education and of housing and of people's lives rather than running it from Washington. I think the people support that.
But, Senator, aren't you disappointed that you're not going to be able to get to 60 votes, which is what you needed to hold off any Democratic filibusters?
Well, it certainly would make my job easier if you have Ted Kennedy that is filibustering an issue. For example, national missile defense, where we're trying to guarantee the American people that they have a missile defense against an accidentally launched or rogue launched missile. We don't have that now. And yet we got 59 votes to cut off the filibuster last year. We lost by 1 vote. Yes, I'd like to have that 60th vote as a Republican. But in that case, we even had some Democrats voting with us. We still couldn't cut off the filibuster. So that's a goal I aspire to. And every majority leader would like to have 60 votes, and we'll keep working for that in the future.
As you know, the Republican candidates for governor who were successful tonight ran away from the presidential scandal and concentrated on more pragmatic and practical solutions to everyday problems out there. Do you think congressional Republicans need to learn something from their brethren in the state houses?
Well, as a matter of fact, I think that was true with the Senate races, too. And that's where I focused most of my efforts. I went into a lot of states around the country. I found that they were campaigning on issues like tax relief and growth in the economy. I found that they were focused on local issues. In many cases, it was just the personalities of the candidates were very much involved and at stake. I think that was the case in New York. I don't think that the president's problems, or impeachment, if you will, was a driving force in very many elections. I don't think that this election is going to affect what we do about that one way or the other either. We have a constitutional process that we have to deal with. The House will take up the facts. They will make a determination whether or not there's an impeachable offense. If they do in the House, the Senate will act on it. It's not going to be controlled by some people's desires or an election. We have a job to do, and we'll do that. But it was not a driving thing in this year's election, I don't believe. And if it had been, maybe the election would have turned out even more to the Republicans' advantage.
Senator Trentlaw, thank you very much. You'll be coming back, still the Senate Majority Leader. They had a pretty comfortable margin going in. But it's pretty clear that what we're hearing, especially from these congressional Republican leaders, that they do want to get on to tax relief and Social Security and some of the other issues that the country seems to be sending a signal about.
Absolutely, Tom. And the Republicans did put advertisements on television in key states over the last week trying to drive home the issue of the president's character. And it did not work. And sometimes it's difficult to acknowledge that. And you heard from Senator Lott tonight and Speaker Gingrich earlier, they have to placate the conservatives in their caucus by being strong on the issue of the president's impeachment and still find a way out of the issue so they can demonstrate to the American people that they will work on issues like Social Security and health care and education.
And one of those states in which they did give very heavy play to that ad against the president was in North Carolina, which they lost tonight. Jim Bunning was in better shape earlier in Kentucky than he was after that commercial hit the airwaves down there.
A lot of armchair quarterbacking tomorrow about whether that was a good strategy or overplaying their hand. You heard Bill Bennett weigh in tonight. He said that Republicans have to get back on offense, and they need an agenda to do that.
All right, thank you very much, Jim Russert. At the White House tonight, we're told that the president has been watching all of this on the internet, msnbc.com, we trust, and that Mrs. Clinton has gone to the movies tonight. She's gone to see Oprah's Beloved, which is the film that is starring Oprah Winfrey and produced by her as well. NBC's David Bloom, however, is hard at work right now. David, what do you have for us from the White House?
Well, Tom, they're positively giddy here at the White House tonight. You've already heard the Republican recriminations from Bill Bennett, from Dan Quayle. The White House is convinced the Republican strategy of attacking the president backfired and that the Democratic strategy of trying to drive out minority voters, drive them to the voting booths, especially African Americans, work. They point to the Schumer race in New York, where 85% of African Americans voted for the triumphant Democrat there. In the 5 tightest races that the White House was watching, the Senate races in New York and North Carolina, and those 3 Southern governorships, they all went Democrat. What does this mean for the White House in terms of impeachments? One of the president's top lawyers who's dealing with the Republicans told me just a few moments ago, I think it changes the way Republicans deal with us. He said the clear message is, get this over with. Tom?
Thank you very much. David Bloom at the White House tonight. We have a late projection based on the returns that we're seeing so far about how the House could turn out, and this would be a stunning victory for the Democrats. They will not take control of the House again, but based on the projection that we have right now and the models that we're looking at, it does appear that the Democrats could pick up 4 seats in the House, not lose seats, but they could pick up 4 seats. Now, traditionally, in an off-year election going all the way back to Franklin Roosevelt, the party of the president in power will lose on average 27 House seats in an off-year election. Here, with the president as wounded as this one is, the Democrats would pick up seats. Tim, that would be a substantial victory for them.
They only need 11 to take control of the House. They're a little short of that. But again, Speaker Gingrich needs a working majority. There are a lot of moderate liberal Republicans who don't often vote with him. We have a deadlocked Congress.
All right. Gwen Ifill is on Capitol Hill. Gwen, what do you think will happen now as a result of the scramble that we've seen here tonight?
We're going to see a big fight immediately for Newt Gingrich's leadership of the House. There were already people who were challenging him, but now Newt Gingrich had put a lot of his capital on several key races. And we've been tracking several of them tonight, and 6 out of the 7 races, including races of Democrats who had voted with the GOP for impeachment, and others, they've all gone Democrat. And as you just said just now in that model, the Republicans, you saw Newt Gingrich a little while ago, you talked to him, and he said, listen, this is still good news, we're still in charge, but that's not what they expected to be able to say tonight.
All right, thank you very much. Gwen Ifill on Capitol Hill. So that would be stunning indeed. 4+ seats for the Democrats to pick up. Going into tonight, it was 206 to 228. That was the difference. Now it could be 210 to 224. There's one independent in all of this. Katie Couric has been taking a look at what voters had to say as they left the polls today about what was on their minds. Katie?
Tom, you've been talking a lot tonight how politicians have used this issue. We look now at how voters today feel about the president's involvement with Monica Lewinsky and what should happen now. When we asked voters how much the Clinton-Lewinsky matter hurt the president's ability to lead the country effectively, 64% said somewhat or a great deal. 36% said it affected his leadership not much or not at all. 33% of those polls said the president should be impeached and removed from office. More voters, 42%, said he should resign. 58% said he should not resign. And the majority of those polled, 47%, said Bill Clinton should be censured. Even though a majority did not support any of these outcomes individually, 67% favored at least one of those actions be taken. Tom, back to you in Washington.
Thank you very much, Katie Couric. And I think that this race, more than any other tonight, may symbolize the kind of mood of the country. This is the Minnesota governor's race. Jesse the Body Ventura, running as an independent, a former Navy SEAL, a former bodyguard for the Rolling Stones, a former professional wrestler, a talk show host, is leading in that race with almost a third of the precincts counted so far against Skip Humphrey, who's the son of the late Hubert Humphrey, and also Mark Coleman, who was a challenger in that race as well. But it's possible that in the state of Minnesota, where they take politics very seriously, they could elect a former bodyguard of the Rolling Stones and a Navy SEAL.
It's extraordinary. And Tom, amongst male voters under the age of 30, Jesse Ventura is getting over 50% of the vote. He's reaching out to a very interesting ingredient in our culture.
This is a big win for the Republicans, Tim. Jim Bunning in the state of Kentucky, our projected winner in the United States Senate. So that will be good news for the Senate Republicans tonight. We'll have continuing coverage on this NBC station. I'm Tom Brokaw for all of us at NBC here in Washington.